How to take care of your saltwater tank when on vacation? Here's how. The two most important things you'll need to figure out first are how to feed your animals and how to replace evaporated water. But before we give you some gear recommendations and some tips on how to implement that gear, let's get the obvious out of the way first. You can either hire a friend or a local fish store to take care of all of this for you. If your local fish store doesn't do the servicing themselves, they'll certainly know of a great company that does. Enlisting a friend or hiring a service company is really important, especially if you plan to be away for more than a week at a time. It's really nice when returning from a couple weeks vacation to know that the water changes have been done, that the evaporation reservoir has been refilled, and that the algae has been scraped from your glass, so when you come home, everything is in tip-top shape. Plus, hiring somebody to look after your tank means that there is going to be somebody on call in case of an emergency, but since you're gone, how exactly would you know that there's an emergency in your tank? More on that to come in a bit. The first thing to consider is how to feed your pets. Most of our saltwater aquarium friends can go a couple days without food, but some need to eat every day. But it's not just your fish. Snails, hermit crabs, sea urchins, and other cleanup crew members also need to be considered. So you're gonna need to pick up an automatic feeder to get things started. I've tested out a lot of these, and my favorite is the everyday fish feeder from Eheim. It screws onto the side of a rimless tank and can feed any sort of pellet food. It's easy to program, can feed several times per day, and you can choose how much it feeds each time. One important consideration is where exactly to place the feeder on your tank. You certainly don't want the pellet food to just end up in the filter sock, so don't place the auto feeder near the overflow. Equally important is you need your pellets to sink, not to stick to the surface and float, because a floating pellet will just eventually find its way to the overflow and into the filter sock. So you have two options here. The first is to select a food that will break through the surface tension of the water. For example, I found that BRS pellets do a good job of this. The second is to use a feeding ring. A feeding ring will catch the food from the automatic feeder and keep it contained so it doesn't go over the weir and into the filter sock. There are several good options available, but if you go with the everyday fish feeder, then the Eheim feeding station works really well for this. While it's super important to feed pellets, don't forget about your algae eaters, especially if you usually feed nori. That diet will have to be replaced while you're away as well. One trick you can use that definitely helps is about a week before you leave, make sure you don't algae scrape at least one panel of the glass. That will definitely help provide some algae, especially for those snails that like to scrape the glass all day long. And then on the day you leave for vacation, be sure to add some nori and or algae wafers so that you can fatten them up a bit before you get back. The last trick is to mix your normal pellets with Hikari Seaweed Extreme. Seaweed Extreme is an awesome pellet food meant for herbivores. If you mix these pellets into your automatic feeder, then some of them will sink to the bottom and provide sustenance for your algae eaters. One last tip regarding your automatic feeder, be sure to set it up and have it run a week before you leave. That way you can fine tune it and make sure it's working properly before you head out on vacation. Moving on to the second essential element you need to take care of before you head out on vacation: evaporation. If you've been filling up your tank every day by hand, the time has come to pick up an auto top-off system. These can be as simple as some sort of jerry-rigged upside-down plastic bottle or a fancy piece of electronic gear with a pump and sensors. Whatever you end up choosing, definitely set it up a week before you leave to make sure it's working properly and to make sure there's enough water in the reservoir to last for your entire trip. For smaller tanks or shorter trips, here are a couple gravity-fed options to consider. The Ice Cap Gravity ATO uses a half-liter container that clips to the side of your tank. You just need to adjust the tubes to the correct height and make sure it fits snugly over the rim of your tank. A half liter isn't a lot of water, so if you need something for a larger tank or a longer trip, check out the Flipper 2.1 liter gravity-fed ATO. It has adjustable feet that can fit tanks between 16 and 20 inches in length, and for example, fits well over the rear filtration chamber of our HelloReef system. It also has the added benefit of hiding all that gear in the rear chamber, so it cleans things up immensely. If you're looking for something a little bit fancier, maybe something you don't have to stare at, here are a couple electronic options to consider. First up is the Reef Breeder ATO, a more compact version of their popular Prism ATO. It comes with the sensor, tubing, and pump. You'll just need to supply the bucket. Place the magnetic sensor in your return pump chamber at your preferred water height, fill up your bucket with filtered water, and place the pump inside. Now, as long as you keep the infrared sensor clean, it will keep your tank topped off. You just need to make sure your auto top-off reservoir is below the level of your tank, because if it's above your tank, what's going to happen when the ATO kicks on, water will start flowing, the sensor turns it off, but because of gravity, water will continue to flow, possibly overfilling your tank. I personally just keep a 5-gallon bucket directly below my tank, but if you can't do that, just put it next to your tank at ground level. The second electronic ATO system I like is the one I'm currently using in my HelloReef system right behind me. It's the Tunza Osmolator Nano. It does the same thing, but instead of relying on an infrared sensor, it uses a float switch. The same advice as the Reef Breeders. What I love about the Osmolator Nano is it's a high quality product backed by a top-notch brand. Also, I like the mechanical nature of the float switch. For some reason, it just feels a little bit more reliable to me than an optical infrared sensor, but that could be completely inaccurate on my part. So you've got your best friend on call, the auto feeder set up, the ATO system running. Now let's consider a controller. Ideally, we want to know immediately if something goes wrong with our tank. That way we can call up our friend or our local fish store to head over to our house to check things out, possibly saving the tank from disaster. Some of the most common problems to happen while you're away on vacation is a heater malfunction, some sort of water leak, or an issue with your auto top-off system. All of these issues can be monitored with a system-wide aquarium controller, something like the Neptune Apex. The Apex also has the ability to alert you of power outages, leaks, temperature fluctuations, and a whole lot more. If you have the interest and the money, by all means, a Neptune Apex is a phenomenal investment. I have personally used several Neptune Apexes over my saltwater aquarium career, all the way from my first tank a decade ago, the Red Sea Reefer 170, and I'm actually currently using one on my living room tank right over there. But if you're not ready to push the system-wide controller button first, I totally get you. Here are a couple other good options that can still give you real-time alerts. Personally speaking, I will never run any aquarium without some sort of temperature controller. First up, we have the Inkbird Wi-Fi temperature controller. Not only can the Inkbird keep your water temperature stable, you can even plug in a fan to the cooling side to lower the temperature in those warm summer months. It's springtime here in the Coachella Valley, and the Inkbird controller actually saved my tank just last week. I was bustling around doing something, and I didn't realize how warm the house had gotten, but luckily the audible alarm went off on my Inkbird controller telling me that the water in this HelloReef tank was over 80 degrees already. Because I was home, I was able to install a fan and bring that temperature down, but when you're away on vacation, that audible alarm is completely worthless because you're not around to hear it, so that is why this Wi-Fi version of the Inkbird controller is an absolute gem. You can set the alarm parameters via their app, and if it goes too high or too low, you'll receive push notifications immediately. Moving on to the second option, the Reef ATO Plus from Red Sea. This is actually a really cool controller and ATO unit in one, so you could actually just use this one thing as both your controller and your auto top-off system. It's not too shabby. And on top of the ATO, it also includes a leak detector, so you'll know if water has spilled anywhere. Basically, the Red Sea controller connects to the Reef Beat app on your smartphone and then can alert you to a problem. The auto top-off unit itself comes with a whole bunch of titanium probes, which act as your ATO sensors and temperature probe. You can check the current water height in the Reef Beat app as well as the current temperature and set alerts to notify you when something is wrong. There are two other things you're going to need to consider before heading out on vacation: pet proofing, really that means cat proofing, and what to do in a power outage. Cats are curious and oftentimes pesky when it comes to our saltwater aquariums. My two cats have developed a few bad habits that are a nuisance when I'm at home, but could be cat catastrophic when I'm away on vacation. First, my nimble cat Scout enjoys jumping on top of the tank. This usually isn't a huge problem except when he misjudges or slips. He can dislodge a wire, sensor, or auto top-off tube. So you'll want to somehow cover up this gear to kitty-proof it. My other cat Dominic is a big chewer, and he especially loves tape, anything plastic, and any sort of rubber-like flexible tube. He especially loves the sound of running water through the tube, so anytime the auto top-off unit clicks on, he can absolutely lose his mind, and he would love nothing more than to sink his teeth into that tube and cause some sort of giant leak to occur every time the auto top-off unit came on. So if you have a cat, be sure that they can't access the auto top-off flexible tubing. Moving on from cats, the fastest thing that will kill your pets while you're on vacation is lack of oxygen during a power outage. Our aquatic friends get all of their oxygen from the atmosphere and it enters the tank with surface agitation. But during a power outage, our return pump and wave maker are off, creating a still glass-like surface, which is terrible for any sort of gas exchange. So what can you do if that happens to get the CO2 out of the water and oxygen back into the water? Well, obviously you need to create some sort of water movement, so using a battery-powered air stone is the perfect option. Before I head out on vacation, I make sure my 2 battery-powered air stones are working properly, have fresh batteries, and then I set them right next to each of my tanks. Then if there's a power outage, all my house sitter or pet sitter has to do is flip it on and put the air stone into the water. So something as simple as that will absolutely save your tank from short power outages. Links to all the gear we've mentioned are in the description below, and for another great HelloReef educational video, click here, and until next time, be well and happy reefing, everybody.